Let's go to Queensland Federal Labor MP and Environment spokesperson Terri Butler. Terri, good to talk to you again. Has the Queensland government overreacted by now banning all Sydney ciders come the weekend?
Well, obviously the Queensland government is doing what all state jurisdictions should be doing, and that is listening to the best medical advice and making the decisions accordingly. So I think most Queenslanders would say that we've been very successful here in Queensland at managing the virus, keeping the state as open as possible where that's been possible, but also doing what's needed to protect Queenslanders. And that's really what the Premier has to do. And so I would encourage everyone to continue to obey the medical advice and to listen to their premiers.
But we all know this is a very difficult balancing act between society or social problems, economic issues, health issues and quelling the virus. You have a state of 5.5 million people, you have 8 active cases, and yet you're blocking out and closing down the tourism industry, for instance, in this way.
Well, I guess one of the reasons we have so few active cases is because we have been very successful at managing this virus. I mean, this is something that has been a challenge for the whole world, and I think in a lot of ways people are still coming to grips with what needs to be done. The best thing we can do is to really listen to that medical advice and make sure that it's adhered to. And of course, I don't envy any state premier the job that they've got to do, Liberal or Labor. This is a very difficult time, but the best that they can do is be guided by the best expertise.
Yeah, I agree about the difficulties, but is there any conceivable way you could imagine that we would be living like this in this country in 6 months' time or a year's time? Because that's the possibility we have to deal with.
Well, I don't pretend to be able to predict the future, and I think, you know, if you had asked me at Christmas whether I thought that come July we would have this situation where borders were being closed throughout our country, where there was so much management having to be done to contain a pandemic, I wouldn't have predicted this at all. So I think we need to be very careful to think through what we can do to put ourselves in the best position for the future. Acknowledge that it's just a fact that we're all facing right now, that there's so much uncertainty in the world, and turn to the expertise, turn to the advice, listen to the doctors, and do the best that we can.
That's the problem, isn't it, though? Because the medical advice tells us obviously there is a virus and that it's likely to be with us for a long while. They say that a vaccine soon is unlikely. So whatever policies we put in place, whether they're economic or legal or our broad health policies, have to be able to last 3 months, 6 months, a year, longer. And what we're doing at the moment clearly is unsustainable.
I think we have to be responsive. I think we have to constantly be responding to the best information possible, the best advice possible. I don't think we can have settings that we think are going to be apt in 6 or 12 months' time because we don't know what the world's going to look like. So all we can do is continue to take the best advice. I mean, I think there's some of the best minds on the planet working towards a vaccine. We don't know what's going to happen with that. I'm not privy to that information. We just have to work with what we have and face the fact that there is going to be some uncertainty, I think, for quite some time to come.
Yeah, just on that, sorry, you're absolutely right. There's a lot to consider. We've got to get the best advice, and politicians in the end have to always make the decisions balancing all those various interests. To that mind, shouldn't federal parliament be sitting at the moment? Shouldn't we actually have our parliament grappling with, debating, formulating these responses?
Look, when the government decided to take the medical advice and can the first 2 weeks of August sitting weeks, we accepted that decision because that was the medical advice. But we have also been very clear that we want Parliament to sit. We want arrangements to be made to allow Parliament to sit. The Australian people have got a right to say to us, you're elected to make decisions, to make the laws, to apply the scrutiny. We want you to do that. And I think that most Australians who are paying attention to these issues, who have got an interest in the way that the government works, the way that politics work, will be wanting us to sit as a parliament. There must be scrutiny. It's really important that we continue to have scrutiny of the COVID response. And of course, we've got a great Senate committee that's been doing that work, but it's a much bigger task than one committee can really do. But also, there's all sorts of other things going on. The work of government doesn't just stop because of the pandemic. There's a whole range of issues. For example, in my portfolio, there's an ACCC report in relation to water trading that the government has that's been sitting with the Treasurer now for a little while. That's something that I think that Australians would be interested to see. There's a range of things throughout my portfolio that I think there has to be scrutiny for. And I want people to be confident and to trust that those of us who've been elected, who hold that sacred trust of public office, are exercising our minds towards scrutinising what the government is doing and are discharging our duties to the Australian people.
Yep, that's what we vote you in for. That's what politicians are supposed to do. You mentioned your portfolio. Joel Fitzgibbon, the resources spokesperson, has attacked Labor's Environmental Action Network, or LEAN, essentially saying these people are sort of green activists who are undermining Labor's cause from within. He's been slapped down today by your leader, Anthony Albanese. Here's Albo earlier today.
Well, it's just wrong. LEAN are made up of people who are committed to environmental action.
Terri Butler, where do you lean on LEAN?
Well, it's interesting. Later in that same interview, I noticed that Anthony said that Labor Party people really are the people who I think often see for what it is, the opportunism of the Greens Party. And this is a party that teamed up with the Liberals to completely cruel climate action, to ruin the best chance of a lasting climate settlement that we had and to set climate action back a decade. That's what the Greens Party is. They're a mob of people who are bad for jobs and bad for the environment. And in that way, I've got to say they're a lot more like the Liberals than they are like the Labor Party. So
are LEAN, though, an activist group within the Labor Party, dragging them more towards that green opportunism, that green defeatism, or are they pragmatic? Can they help Labor come up with sustainable policies?
Well, the Labor Party is, as you know, thousands and thousands and thousands of people, all of whom are passionate enough about the future of the country to join our party. And it's a great party. It's very diverse, and that's one of the things I love about it. But I'll say this. Labor is actually focused on the fact that in this country we have a jobs crisis and we have an environmental crisis, and the government is making a mess of both. We've got a situation where there is actually an ecological catastrophe underway. There was the national bushfire crisis over the summer that's had massive estimates of the amount of animal deaths that came out of that, and of course 12 million hectares burnt.
Yeah.
And we were already a world leader for extinctions before that crisis.
Yeah, we're always going to have bushfires. We're always going to have bushfires. But doesn't this debate show...
No, but that's why we need to have, a strong focus on the environment and jobs.
Doesn't this debate show that the climate policy and environment policy remains the central schism within your party? That's what's dividing your party, has done for 10 years.
Well, I don't think people in our party accept that there's got to be some sort of choice between jobs and the environment. We are the party, the pragmatic party, that wants to do both. We want to have good jobs, well-paid jobs, secure jobs, and we want environmental protection. And we don't think those two things are mutually exclusive. That's something that the government clearly thinks, and it's a problem that I think a lot of the Greens Party people have as well. But we're here in, I hate to say it, but the sensible centre, trying to get policies up that would be great for the environment and great for jobs.
Where you should be. It's where you should be. I don't know whether you're there, but thanks for joining us, Terri Butler.
Thanks, Chris.